Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the fastest rising sports podcast in the game today, and I'm almost certain everyone's new favorite podcast as well. We are the triumvirate of destruction in the sports world. We are the big three of just pure messes happening. We are the sports agents of chaos, live on my Twitter right now, and of course, the Bunts and Bruises YouTube channel, wherever you may be watching us, and whenever you may be watching us, because you may be watching us like a year from now, discovering this podcast, and you'll just binge watch every single episode we put out because it's going to be absolutely outstanding work in a year's time. As always, myself, Jerg, kicking things off, and as always, I am joined by my two partners in crime, literally and figuratively. I will begin with, as per usual, the most well-dressed man. You know, he's got the collar on. He's making us look bad, Rick, but it's our guy, Justin. Zuckman, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. You know, at the first week I did the ratty old fish shirt, and I felt a little out of place. So, you know, I had to step up the game.
I respect it. I respect it. Hey, we raise standards here, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. Mainly for ourselves because, you know, we want to keep climbing. Speaking of climbing, this man has set the standard every single time he kicks off the show. And when I say every single time, this is the second time he's been on. But he has set the standard well and true. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are. Here we go. Our guy, Pod Father Rick.
Excuse me for a minute. I have to get myself ready for the chaos and the weirdness that is this show. Because yes, this is chaos and weirdness. Hello.
He's got his rain glasses on.
I do. Yeah, I'm Rain Man with the 2022 glasses on. Absolutely no. Yeah, this is the best you get as a black T-shirt. I look like I belong, striking the set of Beauty and the Beast on Broadway or something like that. But I'll deal with it as it is. So.
Not bad.
It's good to see you guys.
I was gonna say you really look like the most important camera operator for a Broadway production, but that works all the same.
Well, camera operator for a Broadway production is not really ideal because that would mean that they're making it into a movie, and well, we've seen how Broadway musicals turn into movies. Cats, so which yeah, great. So.
Hey, I mean, who knows, Rick? Who knows? Maybe we'll win a reward for this one day, and hopefully none of us will end up slapping the host when we go up there to accept it. Anyways, pop culture references aside, we are here.
The man resigned from the academy. Come on, give him a break.
We're just insulted that Jerg assumes I won't slap someone.
I was gonna say it's gonna be you and not me because I mean No.
It would be Justin. It would be for a Jets joke. Funny enough, it wouldn't even be for a joke about anything else. It would just be for a Jets joke because he's heard it for way too damn long. But moving on from the hopeful award we want to win one day, maybe we will, maybe we won't, probably won't. But we're going to keep on pushing for it anyways. We start off this week of sports a little bit of a lighter news week. So this is definitely one of those episodes where, of course, we're going to talk news, but we're going to have some fun with our weekly segments. Of course, a podcast so young, we're changing the game by having weekly segments on this early in the process, boys. And this one is the one, I mean, I look forward to both every single week, but this one starts off the show for a reason because I think it is the perfect way, and it just shows the vast wealth of knowledge that our guy Rick has. So Podfather Rick, of course, we have his review of the week. Like I said previously, it could be about anything. It could be sports related, or it even could delve outside the realm of sports, but it could still have a tie in there somewhere. 6 degrees of separation. That's a Hollywood theory right there. Made more Hollywood jokes in this podcast and references than I thought I would. Now, Rick, save us and save the people from me making yet another Hollywood joke here. What is this week's?
The correct terminology is 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. That's the correct terminology right there, not 6 degrees of separation. Then, so on the review today, those of you that watched the podcast last week know that Jurgen made a quintessential Jurgen joke about what I can review in the future. And he mentioned the 1984 Seattle Seahawks because he's trying to be cheeky and trying to be hilarious. And so I said, you know what? Let's review the 1984 Seattle Seahawks. And oh my goodness, what an interesting team this was. The 1984 Seattle Seahawks, the 9th season of the Seahawks in the National Football League, playing out of the Kingdome in Seattle with world-renowned football coach Chuck Knox leading the helm. And this is how you know it's a great start. The season opener for the Seahawks was moved from Sunday to Labor Day afternoon. Why? because the Mariners had a home game, and since you're sharing the stadium, it makes sense that the Mariners take precedent over the Seahawks. They've been there longer by 15 years? Yeah, of course. Let them have first go about it. Why not? The Seahawks in 1984 went 12-4. Very good offense and defensive team. Third best point differential in the NFL, 136 in the positive, and had the best giveaway to takeaway ratio in the league, 20 plus 24. I'll tell you why in just a second. But this was a team that had 7 Pro Bowlers, including Jurgen's favorite, the kicker Norm Johnson was a Pro Bowler. Dave Krieg was the quarterback, threw for 3,671 yards, and Steve Largent, who I mentioned the trivia question last week, 74 catches for 1,164 yards, which is interesting because the team lost their star running back, Kurt with a C, Warner, not Kurt with a K, Warner. By the way, C and K. There you go. Your American Sign Language for the day. You're welcome. This team is actually best known for being second in the AFC West with a 12-4 record. They won their wild card game against the then LA Raiders, who were the defending Super Bowl champions, but lost in the divisional playoffs to Dan Marino's Dolphins, a team that never won a Super Bowl, mind you, with Dan Marino at the helm. This was also the last season that the Seahawks would have a playoff win until they appeared in the Super Bowl in 2005. But one of the things that really threw me was their Week 10 game against Kansas City. They hosted and they won a 45-0 demolition. And I say demolition because it marked a very interesting time. And this is something that, Justin, you and I as Jets fans will know very, very well. We'll relate to a lot. The amount of interceptions thrown in this game were just horrible. It was really quite bad. And this also is the game where Seattle intercepted Kansas City's quarterbacks 6 times, not to mention the fact that they returned 4 of them for touchdowns. 2 of them were in the second quarter, including a 90-yard pick six by Dave Brown, who later had a 56-yard pick six in the third quarter. Keith Simpson had one for 76 yards and Kenny Easley for 58 yards. So when you put all that together, it set actually the NFL record for the most yards returning interceptions at 325 and the most INTs for touchdowns in a game with 4. Something that I don't really think that the Seattle faithful remembers now that they had the Russell Wilson and they had the Pete Carroll and the Marshawn Lynches of the world. But their 1984 team was actually quite stellar in that regard and a force to be reckoned with. But of course, as you know, it was a very different time. They had, of course, Denver, who won the division at 13-3. So Denver was 13-3, Seattle was 12-4, and LA was 11-5, and actually hosted that game. But it was a really, really good team. And unfortunately for them, there were some, problems that happened later on. The next year they were 8-8. Like I said, they didn't win a playoff game for a while at that. But I do want to say this too. They had on their roster 2 soon-to-be NFL head coaches and 1 at the end of his prime player in Franco Harris was one of their running backs in 1984. It was his last season in the NFL, so he had just come off of all his years in Pittsburgh, and then he went to Seattle. But the 2 soon-to-be head coaches were Dave Krieg's backup and one of their tight ends. Dave Krieg's backup as the quarterback was Jim Zorn, who would then go on to be a head coach of the Washington, then Redskins, and then also went back to Seattle to coach the Seattle Dragons of the XFL in 2020. Yes, a very, very fun time. And the tight end who would become a future head coach who would have a 32-33 record, Mike Tice of the Minnesota Vikings. So a very unique team, a very exciting team. And also, let's be honest here, the Seattle Seahawks of old with the blue and the green in their logo were a very prominent logo back in the 80s, something that was easy to emulate, of course. So that concludes the review of the 1984 Seattle Seahawks. As per you mentioned, Jurgen, do you have anything else for next week? Do you want me to do a review of tap water or something like that? I can do something like that, whatever you want.
Comparing tap water from every state you've gone to, I think that'd be a stellar episode.
Oh God, I have to look at the map and see which states I've gone to. But yeah, I can probably do that. Yeah.
Oh man, I can't wait. And he's going to correlate it, ladies and gentlemen, to the better the tap water, the worse the football team is somehow, some way. I'm sure it's going to happen that way.
Actually, yes, the best tap water is where they don't have football teams. That actually makes a lot of sense. You're
There
right.
we go. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. We find ways to make the show as chaotic as possible and as entertaining for all you. No, Rick, you absolutely crushed it. That was amazing. I gotta say, when you mentioned the coaches, like, because this is, I think for both me and Justin, this is a learning experience. So I'm trying to think of the Rolodex in my mind. Like, all right, I don't know a lot of people, but who could have been a coach? You mentioned Jim Zorn. That got to pop out of me because we know the XFL. The XFL, when you and me first started, like, not when I was an intern, but when we were working together, Rick, like the XFL was in the infancy of its rebirth, which is kind of funny to say, but it was in its opening stages, and we were excited about it actually, and then it all went and then it all went down from there.
Well, I mean, I do also have a 2001 first generation 1 XFL football at home still. It's still kept it in very good condition, and I actually just acquired the other day on a whim in a New York Dragons Arena Football League football. So that's now in my office, just resting comfortably next to the Captain America bobblehead. So got to keep things on the up and up. But yeah, that XFL was fun, and I'm looking forward to good things in 2023 when that comes back. I mean, we'll see how the USFL does, but it should be fun to watch some other leagues kind of make their headway.
Yeah, the more football there is, the better it is for all of us. The more jobs there are for these guys coming out of college. If they can't make it to the NFL, at least there's other leagues where they could potentially make it or get a little bit of money.
And actually, just randomly funny thing too, I was looking at, we're talking about other football, we're talking about the Canadian Football League. Their draft is coming up soon, because I know the NFL draft is coming up soon. The top prospect in the CFL draft is actually a linebacker from Penn State, because he was born in Ottawa, so he's got the ability to go back to Canada and be the number 1 pick for, not the Edmonton Eskimos, because this is the lesser known one. The Washington Redskins couldn't be called the Redskins anymore. Well, the Edmonton Eskimos couldn't be called the Edmonton Eskimos anymore either, so they changed their name too. I think it's a little bit better than the Washington Commanders. It's the Edmonton Elks, so I think that's a little bit better, because Elks in Edmonton makes sense. Commanders in Washington, I guess, but it's just too on the nose. But the Elks are a nice touch, I think. So
amazing. The CFL just finds a way to do things better than the worst of the NFL, which is, to me, funny. But like we said, hopefully all these leagues can get up. That means more guys can get opportunities. More guys could potentially jump from these small leagues to the NFL. And then who knows, it could lead to potential future trivia questions if these guys get good enough to maybe it'd be the thing. It's like, before they went to the NFL, what CFL team did they play on, or what XFL team they played on? Speaking of trivia,
you just ruined Justin's question, Jurgen. That was his question.
Rick, you took all of my questions. First, I was going to say who has the most receptions, then the most receiving interception yards. Then I had an Edmonton Elk question lined up. I don't know. You took all of my questions.
Yeah, well,
So it'll be a makeshift off the dome segment for this guy, but I think he's going to do a pretty good job in and of itself. Of course, our other favorite weekly segment is here, Justin's Trivia. Justin, you set the bar high last week. The people want another top-tier question, which I'm almost certain that you're going to deliver. So without further ado, give us your trivia question this week. Let's see if you can stump me and Rick, or if me and Rick are going to work together once again, and we will crack the code of what the answer or answers are.
Well, so far you guys are 2 for 2, so I'm trying to dig deep into my bag of tricks here and see if I could find a question that's not going to get you guys let you guys answer so quickly.
He's clearly depressed.
It's demoralizing, you get it like that, and all of a sudden my trivia doesn't seem so difficult.
Dave Rothenberg gets stumped at least once in his segment, so eventually you'll get us. Maybe it's this week.
All right. We'll see. Well, I guess Rothenberg has nothing on you guys. So let's go. Speaking of top tier, let's have NFL MVPs. And on the subject of MVPs, in the history of the league, there have only been 3 non-offensive NFL MVPs. Let's see if you guys can name all 3.
Well, we know the most obvious one, Rick. I think we could just knock this out the way just because it's the easiest one. Lawrence Taylor.
Correct. Lawrence Taylor was the most recent one in 1986.
Oh, he was the most recent one. That's interesting.
Oh, this is going to be a test.
That's interesting.
This is going to be a test.
Well, I tell you, there's one that I know, Obviously, Lawrence Taylor is one, but there's another one that I know because it is a weird, random statistic.
I think I know. I think
he might be the only special teams player to ever have won NFL MVP. Yes, for you, Jurgen. It was weird because I think that was either the year after or the year of like the split season in the NFL when they had like a two because they had a strike or whatnot. Mark Mosley.
Mark Mosley, the only special teams player, the place kicker for Jurgen. 1982, he was the NFL MVP.
Yeah. So that makes that, yeah. But
this is already a successful episode.
Yeah. I mean, we can just shut it down now and just say goodbye and we're done.
You guys got one more to hit.
We got the kicker. It don't matter. We got to mention the kicker winning the NFL MVP
You would think that'd be the hardest one, but not with Jurgen Rick on this. There's no way that you guys were not going to get the special teams MVP.
Rick knows way more like kicker and punter trivia than he probably should, just because of me and my Pat McAfee show addiction.
I mean that's very fair. That's very that's very fair. Oh shoot, who's the third one?
So we know it's defense, obviously, because we named the only special teamer.
Right.
Now I'm just trying to think about it. So Lawrence Taylor was the most recent one, and like you said, Mosley won in the 70s, Rick.
No, Mosley won in the 82.
82.
Oh, that's right.
So we got to go further back than that.
Yeah. Jesus.
Oh man. Question, Justin. This is Associated Press player MVP, right? Because I know up until there are other like publications that have like Sporting News has had an MVP as well, and sometimes it varies, but this is either the consensus or the unanimous, like the Associated Press MVP, correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
Can look it up.
I think we can run with that assumption.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Give it another couple of years, and then every single Associated Press award is going to be sponsored. The Associated Press, Pepsi, MVP.
The Pro Football Writers, because the reason is because I remember the other thing I remember from 1982 was that it was a split. Like Mosley took the AP, but Dan Fouts, who was the quarterback for the Chargers, was the other guy who had like two of the other three. So I know that it can be a split in theory. Shoot. You know what? I know he's a Super Bowl MVP, but I'm going to burn a guess here just to see if we can kind of, try and hedge our bets here. Harvey White.
No. Harvey White was not in the list of MVPs.
Super Bowl MVP, though. Him and Randy Martin were, I think, maybe until recently, I don't know if they're the only co-MVPs in Super Bowl history, I believe. So, but that's Cowboys, so I'm not sure if
there goes another trivia question out the window, right?
Yeah, I try.
We're just burning all of Justin's trivia questions for the future. We're gonna make it more harder each and every single week.
Man.
So I'm trying to think in my brain of just pass rushers and like DBs as well. Because for some reason it really wouldn't surprise me if a defensive back was the other player to win this. And now this is making me think in my brain of who are very notable DBs who won the NFL MVP award or could have had the opportunity, depending on their career. I think we have to go. I wouldn't be surprised if we have to go early here. I don't think this is the answer, but this guy is up there in the all-time interceptions career list. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he might be close to the top. Like I want to say he was top 3, top 4. Maybe he didn't win it, but I don't think it's a bad guess because back then, like God knows how many guys won these awards and who won certain awards. But Dick Night Train Lane, I mean, like I said, I'm pretty sure he's close to, if not, he is the NFL all-time interceptions leader. Had to have had a double-digit interception somewhere, and I feel like if he had done that back in his era, I think that would have put him in a good standing for MVP.
Yeah, that's a good one.
What was the name? I'm sorry. my screen just froze, and then like I didn't get the name. And all of a sudden, it was like, was it him? And I have no idea. What was the name?
Dick Night Train Lane.
No. No. Sorry. Couple technology issues going on here.
That's okay.
Funny enough, on one side because we saw you perfectly. Like Justin looked perfect to us.
Yeah, he did. We gotta get you a new computer.
Yes.
Okay. So
all right. So we got one more guess each.
So it's not the Cowboys. If it's not in that realm, I'm trying to think of, and it's earlier. The Sack Exchange was in the 80s as well, but I don't believe because the Sack Exchange was Klecko and Gastineau, but they were in the 80s as well. So I'm trying to think of like another defensive stalwart team of the
Steelers,
70s.
maybe?
The Steel Curtain's a possibility. Mean Joe Green, maybe.
I don't think so because I think
No.
he would be mentioned more. I feel.
What about the I mean, the problem is there's nobody of familiarity, at least from my recollection, but the Purple People Eaters from Minnesota.
Not bad, but let's say
there's nobody that I can think of that the name wise I can think of that might be in that category. That's the thing. I don't. This is tricky. This is really, really tricky. I'm just gonna burn it. I don't like it, but I'm gonna burn it. Joe Klecko.
No, Joe Klecko was not.
No,
an NFL.
I had a feeling. Yeah, that does it for me. So, Jurg, it's all on you now.
Yeah.
All on you, Jurg.
I'm totally gonna screw this up for us. Geez, defensive end.
I gotta get that Jeopardy music going.
Well, one of us runs the timer here, and I'll give you a hint. That timer is gonna run as long as it needs to.
Oh boy.
See, now I'm just trying to wait. Wait, hold on. A name just thought in my head. It just came in my head.
What do you got? What's the name?
Because again, I'm thinking really old school here because I feel like it had to have been old school that would have won this award. So I'm thinking even probably further back than what we were thinking, Rick. I think maybe the 60s or even the 50s.
Mm-hmm. That would make a lot of sense. Yeah. The problem is though that there were so many guys that were two-way players back then though. So
True.
they might
they
have
still technically have a primary position, like.
Yeah, but I mean, but even so, like you had edge. Edge was a position, and that was the offensive or defensive at the time. So it was like,
true.
I don't know. What name you think?
As far as I know,
because the name's
not a two-way player.
Okay. All right. So the first one, like some of the names, I was just trying to think of like old defensive guys, and so like Bronco Nagurski, Dick Butkus, like some of those guys popped in my head, but I'm like, I don't know.
Butkus wasn't in that era, but Nagurski's not a bad name, I think.
Yeah, he was like the main one that I want to use, but I'm just trying to think of any more pop in my head.
Yeah.
Can't wait for this to be like an offensive lineman somehow. Because he said no skill position or quarterback, but he didn't say a lineman.
No offense.
Nah, that would have been a trick question. That would have been funny.
Yeah.
That would have been interesting.
I think just so we could actually get things moving, I'm just gonna go with my guess of Bronco Nagurski.
Yeah.
No. Sorry, Jurg. At one point I thought you guys had me. Rick brought up the Purple People Eaters, and I was sure he was gonna guess this guy. In 1971, defensive tackle Alan Page for the Minnesota Vikings won the MVP as part of the Purple People Eaters.
What were his stats? Do you have them?
I can find them.
The problem is that like for whatever particular reason, the Purple People Eaters are just they're more well known as a group.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure the four guys have pretty significant stats, but like they're just a better group. Like we're New Yorkers, so and Judge and I are just fans, so we know Mark Gastineau and Joe Klecko, and we know the New York Sack Exchange, so we know that. But we know Mean Joe Green from the Super Bowl commercial. So we know the Steel Curtain, but Purple People Eaters. It's just like that's just the name of the group. There wasn't anybody. And actually, looking up Page a little bit, like his career. I know Justin, you're probably getting the stats up, but Alan Page was a 9-time Pro Bowl selection and a Hall of Famer. And actually, funny story, he would actually go on to become an associate justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court.
Wow.
Yeah, post career. But it was him, Carl Eller, who was a 6-time Pro Bowler, and Jim Marshall and Gary Larson, who were both 2-time Pro Bowl selections.
He stayed in the realm of defense his whole career then, even after football.
Yeah. And again, it was it was that. It was. Yeah, it was. I mean, that was also the early Super Bowls. That was Super Bowls like 8 and 11 and all that area. So
And they made 3 out of 4.
The Vikings were beasts.
Yeah.
They made what was it? They made three in a row, 4 in a row, and they just
3
lost
out
every
of
single
4, I
time.
believe it was.
3. Yeah, they didn't make Super Bowl 10, but they made 8, 9, and 11. Yeah.
Them and the Buffalo Bills of Jim Kelly. It's like those are the two teams where it's like could have been dynasties. It's like had they just actually won a couple.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that they had a lot of good teams they were running up against in those years. So 8 was Miami. That was back when Miami was coming off of their perfect, or I think entering or coming off of their perfect season, whatever the case was. 9 was Pittsburgh, so that was and that was the first of their 2 in a row, I believe, unless they won the third. And then the last year was Oakland. That was the John Madden run.
Right.
They all were almost perfect that year. So I mean they were the class of the NFC, but the AFC and the AFL
had their number.
time. Yeah.
Had their number. Justin, did you bring up the stats? Because I actually just peeked at them as well.
So I'm not seeing a ton of stats. He was an interior defensive lineman. I do see that he had 2 safeties that season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess maybe just as like the moral leader of the best defensive line in the league at the time, and a historical group, he was the guy.
I think that's probably what you said. Keep being the guy.
So the question really is more. It's more of a case of when was a tackle considered a stat? Because that's kind of the big thing. Is that might be kind of why we lose a lot of that, because if he was as feared a player as he was, and obviously he was, but he all the stats that we have are 9 sacks in the safety. So we don't have tackles. So obviously, we have to just take it by word that he was better than the 2 guys that were tied for second who he beat. Roger Staubach was 1, and Otis Taylor of the Chiefs, who had 57 catches and 1,100 receiving yards, was the other. So we just have to take, that for a grain of salt, that those guys, that he was better than them. Because I guess that's the difference between 70s football and now, is that now there are almost too many stats. But in the 70s, one more stat would have really helped out figure everything out, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Justin, you foretold it. It was said in the Oracle itself. This week, you defeated us. Congratulations, my good man.
It's about time I got on the board.
Well
done.
Done.
The Jets in Super Bowl 3.
Well,
let's hope I can follow it up with a better performance.
I love it. That won't be the last Jets reference of the episode, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
No,
moving on from another amazing course of trivia. So, as per usual, our 2 segments absolutely just kill it. Let's keep it going here. Speaking of shocking moves and just pure entertainment value to me, and this is why we have the show named the way it is, Sports Agents of Chaos. Because who would have thought on a Saturday morning we would see an interdivision trade go down? The Miami Dolphins made a trade today. Now, it was rumored the last couple of days, especially within the last 24 hours or so, that DeVante Parker was on the trade block. I was ready, boys, to come into this episode and talk about the fact that, yes, it would probably be the right move for them just to get a little bit more cap, but also, the wide receiver core is stacked. Someone's going to lose out there. It was probably going to be DeVante Parker, and I think you could fetch at least something decent for him. I think there were teams in the NFC that would have definitely traded a decent asset for Parker, maybe a 3rd or a 4th. I think the Green Bay Packers would have been the first team to come to my head. They need to draft receivers, but they also need a veteran there, and I think DeVante Parker would be good. San Francisco 49ers is a low-key team to me. More weapons for Trey Lance, assuming he takes over the starting role. You need more than just Deebo Samuel there for support. But it was none of those teams. It was an NFC team. It was an AFC team, and it was a divisional team. The New England Patriots traded for DeVante Parker. And they gave up, as expected, a 3rd-round pick, which I think is the going rate for a player such as of Parker's stature. You get about 5 or 6 good games from him where he looks like a number 1 receiver per season on average. And then the rest is you take what you get. So it was Parker and a 5th for that 3rd-round pick. So Miami gets an extra 3rd in the stockade while they give up Parker to New England. A couple of ways to look at this deal, but of course, at least for me, the main shock was it being an interdivision deal, which is kind of slowly becoming a little bit less taboo. I feel like we see them a little bit more often here now than we probably did way back when. Alan Page was the MVP. Definitely didn't see any interdivision moves back then. But the shock, still a pretty good wide receiver, I think, by all circumstances, goes to the division rival. Rick, I'm going to throw it to you first. When you saw DeVante Parker in the trade rumor, did it make sense? And now him going to New England, how much sense does it make for both sides?
I mean, he fell off the radar to me. He really did, because this is a guy who was a top 15 pick in his draft class. And, obviously injuries kind of beheld him to only 93 games since 2015 when he was drafted. But, his stats are impressive for the Dolphins. He was 6th in franchise history in receiving yards and 8th in receptions. So he's a very prominent, very talented player. I just think that, it's a safe risk for the Patriots because of what they gave up to get him. And for the Dolphins, you mentioned it, he was going to be the odd one out. They had Tyreek Hill come in, they have Waddle, they have Cedric Wilson, they have Mike Gesicki. So somebody had to be on the trading block, and it was Parker. Now, does DeVante Parker automatically become the number one in New England? Sure, he could, but the question that I have is he really stepping up to be a number one? I mean, that New England team, it's got Kendrick Bourne, has got a few other players that aren't number ones, and DeVante Parker to me kind of feels more like a number two option. So it feels like they're strengthening their receiving core by adding him, and it feels like it's a case where you pile this up to get Mac Jones somebody who he can throw the ball to on a consistent basis. But again, his injury history is questionable. I mean, I really as bad as it is, I mean, I know his stats are what they are, but I label him as a bust, because you think of a top 15 player, you want somebody who's going to be a little more prolific and somebody who you're not going to trade away within 7 years or barring injuries. So
multiple Pro Bowls and All Pro.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, you expect more. You expect more from that. You expect something better than that from a guy who you spend that time in looking through. So, I mean, again, it's probably a low end option, a low end flyer option for New England, just to get somebody else in the room, while they're waiting to see if they can draft somebody or bring in another wide receiver out of the free agent class. So, I don't hate it for New England. I don't hate it for Miami. I just think it's a move that's it's a move that's a meh. It's a meh for both teams, because it doesn't hurt. It might not help, but it doesn't really hurt anybody in the process.
Right. Justin, kind of piggyback off of Rick's point there. I think DeVante Parker would eventually become the guy to get lost there, because I think what the Dolphins are going for is just to have pure burners. You have Tyreek Hill, you have Jalen Waddle. They got Cedric Wilson from the Dallas Cowboys. They still have like one or two of their guys from Brian Flores' second year, some burners there. Williams, I think, was one of their receivers who he could just be a straight up deep threat. What was your general reaction? Maybe more so, let's focus on the New England side of things. What can DeVante Parker do for Mac Jones here as Mac Jones is entering year two? We know the blueprint to help your young quarterback after their rookie season is try to help them in certain places where you knew it was off. And New England Patriots receiving core last season, there were some moments where they looked good, but there's no real – I mean, they still didn't really add a stud per se, but there's no like definitive number one on that team. Do you think DeVante Parker, like Rick mentioned, we've been waiting for him to really be a true number one receiver when you're drafted that high in the NFL? Do you think maybe that Bill Belichick can help DeVante Parker get to that level?
It's a tough question. I mean, Rick's right. It just didn't work out in Miami. Being in the league for as long as he did, he only had 24 touchdowns and almost 5,000 yards. He wasn't that prolific receiver that you take with the number 14 overall pick. He's certainly the best receiver that the Patriots have on the roster at this point, in my opinion. Maybe Jacoby Myers is a bit better than him, but DeVante Parker just has that experience. If he could stay on the field, he'll open up the field for him. They'll be able to spread it around a little bit more, especially a little bit farther down. And you'll see if Mac Jones can spread the ball farther. Just as a pessimistic Jet fan, of course I think he's going to be a Pro Bowler. And the Miami Dolphins traded him within the division. Of course he's going to be like a Hall of Famer now. All of a sudden, Bill Belichick just got his neck swindle. But no, honestly, the question is, the Patriots have struggled over and over again to find that true number one solid receiver. They've only been successful with one swing of the bat, and that was with Randy Moss. So the question is he going to be that Randy Moss home run, or is he going to be Ocho Cinco when off the team next year? We're going to have to see.
Yeah. And I mean, who knows? Like you said, Bill Belichick, for a while it was seen as that he could get the best out of guys. And to be fair, Nelson Aguilar, the meme wasn't about him anymore with catching passes last year. That meme belonged to the new Nelson Aguilar of Philadelphia in Jalen Reagor, which poor kid. That was the worst possible situation he could have gone to if he was going to struggle this early in his career. But it's certain to be interesting. I think DeVante Parker can help Mac Jones. I was a DeVante Parker fan early. I really did like him coming out. It's just I think Miami – you think of all the offensive inconsistencies there. Like, I just feel for the guy. And early in his career, I want to say the first half of his career, it was some injury issues. He played a lot better within the last 3 to 4 seasons, but still, to both your guys' points, not to a receiver that should have been drafted as high as he was. And Belichick is going to hope that he can continue to work his magic and get the best out of guys. But there's no Tom Brady there, so we'll see how much that magic can really work out here. But I will say, though, at the same time, DeVante Parker, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, it's not bad to have weapons there for Mac Jones.
In a way, too, it also kind of rights the wrongs of what they're drafting of N'Keal Harry back in 2019, because he didn't really pan out the way they intended him to be. So he's probably going to be on the move as well at some point, which is interesting for a kid who was drafted in the 2019 draft to now be 24 and to be on the move. But the thing is that he was disgruntled as well. He wasn't getting the touches because that wide receiver room was crowded. And he wanted to be a number one, and that's why, he was drafted in the late first round, the very late first round. He was trying to be a number one, but, it doesn't pan out there. So it's interesting, the moves that are made that are more like cutting in a sense, in a way, where this is kind of like ending the N'Keal Harry project in New England as well. But yeah, you're right. Adding Parker with Henry and Smith, it does give Mac Jones a few more options as long as he can continue to provide on that offensive side of the ball for New England.
And I will say, N'Keal Harry, if in 3 to 4 years, if he could get closer to what DeVante Parker is at currently, I mean, it's not great, but it's a lot better than what we have seen so far from him in his Patriot career. And heck, maybe even on the right team, it could work out for him.
Yeah.
We got to talk about the Dolphins side of this also. How about the Dolphins hedging their bets and acquiring draft picks for next year, just in case maybe this 2 experiment doesn't work out? All of a sudden, they got 2 firsts, 2 thirds. They're looking like they're a team that could be primed to move up for a quarterback if they need one.
Especially because I want to say DeVante Parker definitely had another year after this one, so even a little bit of money there taken off.
I believe
but
he's got
perhaps
2 years.
The money could have also been to pay a cornerback on that team handsomely. Rick, you mentioned it in our group chat last night. Xavien Howard, or his last night this morning, I forget when. Time is an illusion to me when it comes to my job. But Xavien Howard was, of course, a couple years back, he signed what was one of, if not the richest quarterback contract in the history of the game. Now, of course, as time moves on, you no longer become the guy. Sans Devontae Adams, 5 days is the highest paid wide receiver in NFL history. But moving on from that, Xavien Howard was the highest paid corner. A couple guys, including one of his own teammates that signed afterwards, got highly paid, went past his contract, and he clearly looked at the Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill book of, hey, I want to get paid way more than what I should be right now. And instead of getting traded, though, he went to the organization. They were like, you know what? We'll do it. But they did rework the contract. Rick, because you brought this up, I want to give you the credit. You are going. I want you to open things up for us on this topic with Xavien Howard's new, very lucrative deal.
Yeah, so I mean, the premise of this really started in 2020 when Xavien Howard was maybe the best corner in all of football. He had 10 interceptions, 20 passes defended, started all 16 games, 51 total tackles. And in 2021, he almost sat out of training camp saying, I'm not getting paid enough. I want to feel undervalued. So he goes out that year. He starts every game, 50 tackles, 5 interceptions. And the Dolphins, he was clearly the best player in that room. But it was funny because the Dolphins had basically said to him, listen, we'll tweak the contract now, but we're going to revisit this in the spring. We promise you. Just play for us this year. We promise you. And it's kind of refreshing in a way to see a team kind of stick to that promise because Howard got a 5-year deal worth all about $51 million in new money. The new money averaged about $25 million. It makes Howard not only the highest paid per year corner in NFL history, but he's the first corner in NFL history to have a 5 years of his playing career fully guaranteed. And it's something that is significant because up until Tyreek Hill joined the Dolphins, you could argue, and you wouldn't be wrong, that Howard was the best player in that room. He was the strongest fit. And again, it's funny that we talk about, draft capital. Well, Parker was a mid-first round guy, and, he did this, but, he's injured a lot. Howard was an early second round guy out of Baylor that the Dolphins just stole, basically. And he's rewarded them with excellent playing capability. And, they rewarded him. Yes, he has had some injuries here and there, but that's basically a non-starter for him. Like he's deserved the money that he's gotten because of how well he's played. And for Miami to, like you said, rework that deal to reward him, they had sacrificed something, but the draft capital they recouped from New England helps out a lot too. And the draft capital that they gave away to Kansas City also kind of allowed them to free up some space to give Howard the money that he wanted and desperately, I think, deserved. So it's a smart move on both parties. And again, it just shows good faith in an organization. It's refreshing. Good faith in an organization, provides this reward at the end. And that's what Xavien Howard has.
On both sides as well, because I think it took a lot for Xavien Howard to also be patient with the organization, because this also didn't happen right away. We're a good bit into the offseason at this point, and I got to give him props for waiting on the organization, and he trusted them, and they also trusted him. I think both sides really did a good job there with the new contract. Justin, I want you to continue with Rick's point. Xavien Howard, we know part of the reason he got that big money deal was that breakout season with interceptions he has. But you can honestly argue he's actually played even better since then. Now, he doesn't have the interception numbers, but I think in today's game with cornerbacks, it's not necessarily about how many interceptions they get a season. You think of Jalen Ramsey, he shuts down one side of the field. You think of Jair Alexander, he shuts down one side of the field. You guys being Jets fans, you saw a prime Darrelle Revis, who I think for all intents and purposes was the best man-to-man corner since Deion Sanders. He didn't always get the high interception numbers in seasons, very rarely actually, but he was called Revis Island for a reason. He would shut down. You would put him on the number one receiver, and that guy just did not exist. Just did not exist. So to sign their guy to make sure that defense stays strong, because like you mentioned earlier, Justin, with a previous point, not sure about Tua, you need that defense to be strong. So how big of a deal was it for Miami to get Xavien Howard in the fold for this upcoming season?
Well, I think it's huge. He's exactly what DeVante Parker wasn't. He had some injuries, but he's been a picture of consistency when he's on the field. He's led the league in interceptions twice. He didn't always have that, huge number, but interceptions is a glamour stat. That's something that you're going to see when you're an unproven guy that's being challenged all the time. Once you're that guy, you're not getting the ball thrown at you every time. And he still had 16 passes defended last year and a sack and an interception for a touchdown. And he's just, when he's on the field, he's got to be the quarterback of that defense. I think they did an excellent job locking him up for the future.
Yeah, and to Rick's point, I think that this isn't the only time when the Cowboys reworked DeMarcus Lawrence's deal, he also became the first guy, I think it was the first either defensive end or pass rusher in general, to get the first 7 years of his NFL contracts fully guaranteed, which, like, to Rick's point, I think this is a refreshing thing to see with the NFL, because the NFL is always the sport when it's talked about like guaranteed money. It's always an issue. Like NBA, the guys' money is guaranteed. NHL, MLB, guys' money is guaranteed. Heck, they get paid for not even being on teams anymore. But at the same time, you think in the NFL has always been that sport where it's like guys stress for the money because it's not guaranteed. And for Howard, for Lawrence earlier this offseason to get that, it's a refreshing thing, because I think it's setting a new standard for this league for these guys to get those guaranteed dollars.
Right. And Howard's locked up until his age 33 season. And he's, like I said, age 28 now, and he's already got 27 picks. I mean, I know, yeah, Justin, you're right. It's a glamour stat, but 27 interceptions in 5 years in the NFL is a good clip. So that tells you how feared he is, and that tells you how much of a difference maker he is on that side of the ball for a team that, as we mentioned last week, was one game away from the playoffs. And, all it takes is one kind of run like that. And, if Miami
really they couldn't put a win in early.
Well, right. Yes, of course. But, I mean, what happens when you play a 2-quarterback system, And a
2 offensive coordinator system.
Exactly. So it just adds more, proof to that medal that, if Miami can draft well and add another corner who can kind of be in the Howard model, then that's going to be a really difficult time for any team that plays Miami to have those two shutdown corners facing them, going up against their top wide receiving options.
Yeah. Byron Jones as well being on that team. Going to be interesting to see. I actually wouldn't be surprised if the Dolphins maybe even go for a corner in the second round, because you just never know. You always got to restock, because who knows? This could be Tua's breakout year, and it's like, oh, we got to pay him in 2 years. So, or like Justin said, maybe they're gearing up for the next guy in. Who knows? But at the same time, good on you, Miami. You paid your guys. You did the right thing. You did the job. Also, by the way, Rick, with the 27 interceptions that you mentioned within the last 5 years, I think in today's game, I think a lot of people, like you guys have said, it's a glamour stat. With how pinpoint precise these quarterbacks are, like to get near 30 interceptions over a 4 or 5 year span for a corner. That's really impressive when you think about it. And also, I think the final point is Xavien Howard. He's still proving himself after those big interception seasons. That tends to be an issue with some corners sometimes. There's some doubt if they can continue that level of production. Not for the interceptions themselves, but to be a shutdown guy. That's why I think a lot of people are going to be intrigued to see what J.C. Jackson is like in Los Angeles per se, because he's had the interceptions now the last couple of years with New England. But now that he's gotten paid, can he be a true shutdown corner, which is not just interceptions right now, it is being that dude. So LA, we'll see. Maybe they'll need to rework J.C. Jackson's contract if he is the real deal in 2 to 3 years, just like this. Who knows? I feel like a lot of different guys are going to get contracts reworked over the next couple of years, and it's just going to be it's going to be fun if they stay, and it's just going to be pure chaos if they want to get out, a la DeVante Adams and Tyreek Hill. And hey, the more chaos, the better it is for us. But speaking of a little bit of chaos, that wasn't mentioned the DeVante Parker trade earlier. It wasn't the only interdivision transaction that happened, but this one wasn't a trade, boys. This was a signing. This man chose to stay in the division. Bobby Wagner staying in the NFC West, doesn't stay with the Seattle Seahawks, because it'd be really weird if they cut him, they said it was done, then he for some reason went back. That would have been funny. It's not like the Fletcher Cox thing where it's like, yeah, we're going to cut you, but we want you back. It's like, yeah, we're going to cut you, we don't want you back. And he's like, I want to come back. Yeah, no, that's not what happened here. Bobby Wagner, who we were going to talk about last week, but Iron Man match rules, ladies and gentlemen. Our time limit ran out, so we were unable to talk about him and give our fits. Honestly, though, I think all of us would have agreed that LA would have been the best fit. So we would have all just been trying to pick another team to add to the segment. But Bobby Wagner, a 5-year, $50 million deal with the Rams, could be worth up to $65 million. What a deal by the Rams. It was reported earlier in the week that they were not what's the word, waning here and there. They were going in and out of it. They wanted to give Wagner that yearly average, but they clearly understand, hey, this guy is an absolute beast. I forget if it was Pro Bowls or All Pros. It was one of those numbers, but the 2 defensive players of the last decade with the most All Pros are now on the same defense. It's Aaron Donald and it's Bobby Wagner. Justin, I'm going to throw it to you first. Rams obviously have had to lose a couple pieces in the Super Bowl defense and the cap crunch. It feels like champions always undergo a cap crunch in sports. Chicago Blackhawk fan, I can understand that for hockey purposes. How big of a defensive boon is this for LA to not only get a good linebacker, because LA's always had good middle linebackers, but this has been the premier guy over the last decade. How big is that to get Bobby Wagner for this run to try to defend their title? Justin, you're muted.
Okay. It's absolutely huge. What do you say?
I was gonna say, Jurgen last week and you this week. Am I the only one that knows how to do podcasting properly? Come on, man.
I mean, by the law of averages, it's your turn next week, Rick.
Oh, that's fine. Okay.
Continue.
If 2, then it must be a third, right? No, it's a huge move for the Rams, especially to steal him from within the division. This is a guy that's led his team in tackles consistently. He's a picture of excellence playing at the linebacker position. The Rams now have superstars at all 3 levels. They should absolutely be the favorite to come out of their division at this point. People are going to talk about how they've lost certain players and maybe OBJ's not coming back and all that stuff. But, I don't understand how they keep signing these players for all this money. They had $8 million in cap space this year and somehow signed a guy for a 5-year, $50 million contract. I don't understand it, but I think it was an excellent move. Kudos to Les Snead for getting him under the cap. And again, it's going to be a very fearsome defense.
Rick, similar thing. So not the first time for the last 5 or 6 years this has happened to Seattle, because when Richard Sherman left, he took his talents over to San Fran, and they made a Super Bowl, I want to say ever in his first or second year with the team after he left Seattle to go there. What is it about Seattle that all these defensive guys, they want to go to a division rival? What is it? I
think what it is it's a matter of how messy the breakups are in Seattle. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, this is a significant thing that they've been talking about, is that John Schneider and Pete Carroll have even gone out in public and said, yeah, listen, we take the blame for this whole Bobby Wagner thing, how it happened. Basically, Wagner knew that he was going to be released before the Seahawks told him, and even before Schefter reported it. So Wagner knew. So really, whatever moles or whatever secret keepers they have in Seattle were not doing a good enough job. But I think what it does too is it provides a little bit of an extra cushion, because one of the big losses that kind of went under the radar was how large of a signing Buffalo signed Von Miller for away from the Rams. And this is an immediate plug and place, change. Wagner's gonna go into that LA system and just be the guy again, like Von Miller was the guy. Yeah, you got Aaron Donald there, of course, but on that linebacking core, it's going to be Wagner's team. And so, yeah, I think that for Seattle, they just have got to figure out how to either keep players happy, or if they're going to go, how to not make it such, ill will, because now, Russell Wilson and Denver are going to Seattle this season. So that's one revenge game. Now you got to play Bobby Wagner twice, once in LA and once in Seattle. And that Bobby Wagner is going to be cheered royally when he gets there, because Seattle loves to have Bobby Wagner there. They love to have Wagner as like a core member. And I assume he would probably have, if he had stayed there, he probably would have been a Ring of Honor candidate for Seattle. Probably still is. So I think it's a matter of, now you have to just take the lumps that you get and know that Wagner's going to come in there and his mission is going to be to absolutely kill whoever is standing back in the pocket as your quarterback and get that adulation and get that praise from that side. So I think, Seattle, we've talked about it. We've talked about it constantly, that their moves, they're hitting the reset button. Well, they're also kind of hitting burning bridges along the way. And if you ever wanted to go back and watch the video of the old Tacoma Narrows Bridge, how it was swaying in the wind and then collapsed on itself, that's kind of what the Seattle Seahawks are doing right now. It's like, oh my God, and then boom, just dead. That's what Seattle is right now. They're dead. They are absolutely dead.
Especially when you think, you mentioned Bobby Wagner for Ring of Honor. I think it should be, no question that the most important players from the Legion of Boom end up in the Seattle Seahawks Ring of Honor, because you got Sherman, Chancellor, Earl Thomas, you have Bobby Wagner, probably Michael Bennett. You can make a case for Cliff Averill. I think that's when you start to push it. But those two guys were like the two main components of the front four in terms of pass rush production. And a couple, especially mainly more so Bobby Wagner, will be a Hall of Fame candidate, I got to feel, when his career does ultimately wind down. It's really insane to think that this team was on the precipice. I'm not going to make the joke of it, but they were literally a yard away from back-to-back Super Bowl championships, and how that would have changed. And we see in Atlanta, if they win that Patriots Super Bowl, it's not even a discussion if they want to get Deshaun Watson. They're going to stick with Matt Ryan. Like, a Super Bowl can do so much for a legacy, and an extra one could have done so much. Because we honestly sometimes forget, I think, because of the Patriots Super Bowl, that Seattle got their Super Bowl. Seattle got their victory. And yet at the end of the day, stuff like that happens. And like you said, burning bridges, everything falling apart. I think they more so napalm these bridges at this point, because these guys they don't just want to leave. But in the case of Sherman and Bobby Wagner, they go to division rivals. Earl Thomas, they were able to trade out of the conference. And Cam Chancellor, had he wanted to leave, who's to say he wouldn't have gone to a division team? Yeah. Maybe he would have gone to Arizona. This would be the completion of the trifecta in our minds.
Well, I think the thing is too also that it's all about perception. Like, yeah, Seattle got their Super Bowl, but do we really remember anything from that Super Bowl aside from what the score was, the first play of the game, and the Bruno Mars concert at the halftime? Like, we don't really remember anything else from it because it wasn't a memorable game. Like, when Seattle first went to the Super Bowl in, I think it was 05 or 06 and played Pittsburgh, the play we remember is the Antoine Randall L, wide receiver pass, and then Bettis announcing that was his retirement. You remember that. You just talked about, Atlanta, New England. You talked about, New England, Seattle, the 1 yard away. You can't really name one specific play aside from the first play of the game that resulted in a safety from that Seattle-Denver game because of how boring it was and how over it was from the very beginning. So, in a way, like, I think that's perception. I think it's a matter of, nobody really remembers that Seattle won that Super Bowl and has a trophy in their name, except for the players that were there. But now it's been how many years? It's been, 9 years almost, I think, since. Yeah. It's like, okay, great, but, it's one of those things like, oh, yeah, I remember that vaguely, but, not much else. It's sad because it's true, but it's sad.
I remember arguing in my chemistry class about the Broncos Seahawks Super Bowl.
It was a tough one. That offense was so potent that year. Everyone was deeming it, the unstoppable force versus the immovable object. But like Richard Sherman said, Peyton was throwing ducks that game. Percy Harvin had a return touchdown.
That force got stopped.
Moments there.
That force got stopped by that object.
That force ran out of juice.
Oh yeah. Honestly, the funny part is about that, Justin, is that everyone on that offense got paid essentially because of that. Julius Thomas ended up getting paid by the Jaguars. Eric Decker ended up getting paid by the Jets. Demaryius Thomas, he stayed in Denver, of course. Well, he eventually did leave, but for the prime of his career, he was still a Denver Bronco, and they definitely paid him. Every important player on that team essentially got paid. Even some of the guys who 2 years later would be key parts of the defense ended up getting paid. You think of some of the guys on the defense side. What are you?
Not true.
What happened?
Not true. Your Super Bowl MVP didn't get paid. Malcolm Smith won the MVP that year.
Mm-hmm.
Was a reserve in 2014 because KJ Wright was returned from injury. And then 2015, he went to the Raiders for a 2-year, $7 million deal. So he didn't get paid.
Well, I meant more for the Broncos.
MVP.
I meant more for the Broncos.
Well, yeah, but still, he got paid later because he went to the Niners on a
really?
He went there for 2.7, then he went to San Francisco afterwards for a five-year, $27 million deal that only lasted 2 seasons because they released him because he wasn't good. But you expect a bigger payout, and what you get is thank you for your service, but KJ Wright's back. Go to the back of the bench.
Yeah. If only Al Davis
is Super Bowl.
If only Al Davis was still there, he would have paid him. No. I just want to get the Al Davis joke because I know where you're going with this, Justin. But if only Al Davis was there, because he would have paid Malcolm Smith.
Rick, how often is a Super Bowl MVP really the best player on the team? I mean, Malcolm Butler was a Super Bowl MVP. He got paid handsomely, and a few years later, he wasn't as relevant as he was. I mean, he's making his return now to New England, but he's not the number one guy there. There's consistently, Super Bowl MVPs that just aren't the guys that deserve to be paid. Compared to they have that one good game in the biggest moment of their career, and that's the guy you want on your team, sure. But is he going to be worth, all those millions and millions? He's not the reason you got there. He's part of it, but he's not the reason you got there.
Look, I mean, I tend to agree with you on that aspect, but the MVP listings, if you look up and down the listing, you can have an argument that the best player on each team played the best game for that team, and therefore they reserved it. I mean, obviously you're not going to take anything from Tom Brady. Like the guy's won 5 of them, so obviously he's got it. Mahomes has won 1.
From Tom Brady.
Well, of course. Well, I know we both will, but okay. But look at it. So Brady, Mahomes, Breeze, Eli Manning, Ray Lewis at the time when they won the Super Bowl. I even will go say Cooper Kupp was probably the best player on the Rams last season.
Should have had more MVP votes last year, but that's
he should have absolutely. But wide receivers don't get that love. But at the same time, yeah, you're right. Like one star turn, Deion Branch's star turned into something. Dexter Jackson's, I don't really think it turned into that much, but it's Kurt Warner's a Hall of Famer, and he had a Super Bowl run to remember. 2 of them actually. He didn't win the second one, but it was close. But
game, yeah.
Oh, it was a great game. But again, those games you remember. But the Seattle Super Bowl win, nobody really knows because it happened. It happened. That's all you can say about it.
That's true. It did happen. It almost feels like if a tree falls in the forest and only one person was there to see it, are you going to take their word? We know the Seahawks won a Super Bowl.
If it's Jerry Jones, then no, I'm not taking his word.
Well, Jerry Jones may have cut down that tree, right?
Hey, well, probably that's true. Yeah.
So that part you would actually believe,
Yeah.
But no. So Bobby Wagner, of course, big deal that he stays in the division, continuing the now longstanding, it almost feels like Seattle Seahawks tradition of F that organization. We're staying in the division. Speaking of former NFC West defensive players, Tyrann Mathieu, and of course also AFC West. Well, soon to be formerly AFC West. Tyrann Mathieu, the other big name defensive free agent that we were unable to talk about last week. We're going to get into him real quick. Like Rick, I believe it was Rick that mentioned this on previous episode, where Mathieu has essentially said that he wants to wait till after the draft for all intents and purposes. But let's have some fun because we know we have to wait for them, but we're not going to wait to give our predictions on where he could go. So, fellas, Rick, I'll start off with you. Your prediction for Tyrann Mathieu, still pretty good, still got a couple years left, can be a leader on a defense, has been on a championship-winning team, has had some good seasons. This is a guy that can help a team. What team could you see him going to? Is he going to link up with Jamal Adams in Seattle? Probably not. So what team, aside from the Seattle Seahawks, is Tyrann Mathieu going to play for next season?
I would have said Pittsburgh initially, but they just re-signed Carl Joseph, so that probably takes him out of the running because that's a safety that will pair up with Minkah Fitzpatrick, so they're probably not going to get him. I'll be honest with you. I feel like this is a case where is an interdivision signing again. Like I think we said, the taboo behind it is gone. And I really, the biggest reporting that I've seen that to me piques my interest to a significant matter, and it's something that Chad Jensen reported yesterday on Sports Illustrated. Denver looks like the team that could be in the running and the most fawning for him. I mean, he's got a lot of different options that are on the table because of he is a really, truly good player and still young and still, fiery and feisty and all that. But I feel like it's a case where Denver might poach him from a divisional team. And I think, that's a good option for them to have in their secondary with all the moves that they've made to steal Matthew away from Kansas City, because, in the AFC title game, the minute that Matthew, not in the title game, but in the divisional game, the minute that Matthew was out of the field with the injury, Josh Allen just went nuts with throwing the ball in the middle of the field because Matthew wasn't there. So to have that presence and to have even that name, that fear, that's going to make Denver a much more significant, much more powerful team. So I think it's a great move for them, and all the moves that they've made have led to Russell Wilson and Tyrann Mathieu being on the same team, and I think Denver's the best option.
That would be, you're talking about, the arms race in the AFC West. Justin, you could piggyback off of that specific team and give your own as well. Tyrann Mathieu and Justin Simmons as your safety tandem, man, that would be, they're trying. That'd be rebuilding the no-fly zone that Denver had, just a couple of years later when they won their Super Bowl against Carolina. So that's not a bad one at all. Justin, I'm going to throw this one over to you now. You can take your turn with a Tyrann Mathieu. Where does it make sense for him to end up? Because this is a guy, he's been paid. He's probably going to get paid on this deal as well. I think part of the reason why he's no longer in KC is because he wants that one final payday in his career. Could be a good 3-4 year deal at least. What team can pay him and also probably gives him a pretty good chance of winning the Super Bowl?
So that's what I'm looking for in this. Denver would be a great fit. By the way, they only were +1 in the turnover ratio last year, and they were, I think, 14th in passing defense. So that would be an excellent, excellent fit for them. But they don't really have a ton of cap space right now. It's funny because, as much as I want to say that he's going to go to a new team, the Chiefs just cleared up a whole bunch of cap space. It would be excellent for them to re-sign him. If I had to, make a spicy pick, I'm looking at two teams that were low in the turnover ratio and had a rough passing defense last year. The Browns and the Colts, both teams with a lot of cap space that could use that secondary help. He could jump on that bandwagon with Deshaun Watson. All the players seem to be heading towards the Browns. Apparently they have interest in Will Fuller now, which would be an excellent second receiver there. To pair him up with like Greedy Williams and that young secondary in Cleveland would be an excellent move. And I got to say, with Matty Ice there, the Colts are win now, and they have the third most cap space currently in the NFL. Would make sense. Just pay the guy. Give him what he wants. Throw the farm at him.
Right. And I think the Colts have been a team for a couple of years now. They've always been towards the top with cap space. I think they're a team that people want to see spend that cap space because there is something there with this.
Never spend it on free agents either.
Yeah. It's because like Ballard has always said he wants to retain his guys and give them their contracts. But I want to say Darius Leonard's been paid. DeForest Buckner got his money. Like, who else is there to be paid on that team right now that's coming up? Like, if a name's slipping my mind, it's slipping my mind. But
it would have been Marlon Mack, but he's gone. So there's that.
Right. And Quentin Nelson, did they already paid him? If I'm not mistaken,
I believe so. Yeah.
So if like the three main guys that you've been waiting to pay this whole time have been paid, what are you waiting for? They're definitely a team. Justin, that's not a bad selection at all. I think both, but especially the Colts with the cap space that we know they always seem to have. Like people have also been trying to tie. We talked about our free agents last week. I think Dwayne Brown could be an option with the Colts. Julio Jones, even with the Matt Ryan connection there. Like, it's just so many different guys can go to Indy. And it's all about, like, do they want to throw the checkbook at them? And here's the thing. They can. And it's like, it's almost refreshing to see a team that has the money try to use it wisely. But I feel like now they're being too shy with it. Like, spend a little bit.
Reserved. Yeah, for a team like the Colts that's so win now, they have all these young players on rookie contracts. They have all these older players on expiring contracts. They were a top team offensively and defensively last year. They just missed the playoffs because of some poor quarterback play, but that should be rectified this year. You have all this cap space. Why not make a couple of splash signings on 1-2 year deals? If it doesn't work out, you're blowing it up in 2 years anyways.
Well,
go for it.
But here's the thing. I'm just looking up now. So they just exercised the 5th-year option on Nelson's deal. So Nelson's going to get $13.75 million this year, which means that he's going to be coming up to be paid handsomely. So that could throw a little wrench in the plans for blowing it up in a year or two, because if you're going to commit all that money to Quentin Nelson, which you should, because he's one of the best young linemen in the game, but will that hurt you? Will that if you make a splashy signing for Matthew now, if you're the Colts, will that prohibit you from giving Nelson a significant amount of money, for his new contract when that comes up, which is going to be, we're going to have this discussion next year, basically.
Which is almost certainly a fair point for sure. Myself personally, I'm for my Matthews team real quick, I'm going with the San Francisco 49ers. I think why not? You need a little bit of help in the defensive backfield. I feel like the last couple of years, especially back in that Super Bowl run, the defensive backfield has always been the part of this team that really needs the most help. I think Tyrann Mathieu would be an excellent selection for them. One thing I loved about that San Francisco team that made it to the Super Bowl, I almost said one because I actually did pick them to win that Super Bowl, and Patrick Mahomes has maybe regret that decision ever since. But they had Richard Sherman. Richard Sherman was the emotional leader on that defense, heart on their sleeve kind of guy. Tyrann Mathieu is a similar type. He's absolutely not shy to let you know how he's feeling. He could be the leader of a defense on a championship team. We have literally seen it. San Francisco knows it. And I think, it's a very John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan type move to go after a guy that they've gone up against, that they know what he can bring. And you know what they always say, gents? It's always best to trust the devil you know than the devil you don't. And that in and of itself is going to be the case, I think, if San Fran made a go for a Tyrann Mathieu. And just the safety core there in general, no names pop out in my head because there's no one really of that caliber. I think a Tyrann Mathieu would be a massive facelift to the secondary and would really help that defensive back crew there. He could be the quarterback of just that crew while the front seven can do the thing. Because the front seven of San Fran is always great. You want to talk about having guys at all three levels, like you mentioned earlier, Justin, with the Rams. You have Bosa on the front four. You got Fred Warner, I believe, in the linebacking core, and then you have Tyrann Mathieu in that backfield. It's three really good players on all three levels. Maybe not to the same level as the LA guys, maybe, but still very, very talented pieces all around that team. Speaking of the devil you know and the devil you don't, boys, well, there was some sort of blood pact made in Tampa Bay with Tom Brady returning, allegedly, because perhaps part of the deal when he met with the Glazers over in Europe, because everything always has to happen in Europe for some reason with all these superstars, is perhaps a new head coach had to be put on the team. But we'll get to that in moments. Burce Arians of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, now the former head coach. He stepped down as the head coach, choosing to take a front office position with the team. And as such, Todd Bowles gets to take up the reins as the new head coach. I will say props to Burce Arians because he had always said with Todd Bowles especially, or Leftwich, if he was going to step down, one of them was going to take over. He always wanted that to be the case because he never wanted either of them to go to a bad team, especially for Bowles. A little bit of a shot he's taking at a certain team that wears green, but we'll let that slide for the moment. But big thing for Todd Bowles. This is now his second chance to be an NFL head coach. This is always a concern, especially with minority coaches, on if they have a bad first tenure, do they get that second shot for themselves? Very happy just personally for Todd Bowles on that level that he is getting a second chance here to work with a team, and a pretty good one on paper at that he has the experience with. But before we get to Todd Bowles, because there is a little bit of talk, because I do this with two Jets fans, of course, we have to talk about the other aspect. Now, I bring up the Brady thing because for myself, when I first saw this, I kind of reacted I actually would believe it if he says at the end of the day it's about his health, because he's done this in the past when it came to health. I believe he left the Arizona Cardinals for the year or two that he was gone because I know he cited health back then. And just the job of being a head football coach, a head professional sports coach in general, is tiring. You have to give up minimum 3/4 of your day on a daily basis, especially the closer it gets to game day. Your family essentially doesn't see you. So this is a guy who has had health issues in the past, plus the stress. That was my mindset with it. And then I go onto the internet and I see a bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to throw this over to – who do I want to throw this over to first?
Spin the wheel.
Spin the wheel. I don't have sound effects. I don't make enough to afford sound effects. Justin, you're the winner.
All right.
So come step down.
Two of us.
Come step down on the Price is Right, Justin. Funny enough, you say it's two of you, but there are actually 50 different shards, and you guys were each 20. Actually, no, wait, you guys were only 24 times. The other two said bankrupt. And the other one, I don't get the reference. This may have been from Rick. It says crowd control. Irregardless, Justin, you win the spin, and you get to talk about it first. What was your immediate reaction to Burce Arians? And now that we have a couple days here to like take a step back with it, what do you think really went down in your mind?
What do I think really went down? I think he screwed it up last year. Let's be honest. Listen, I like Burce Arians. He's not a terrible head coach. To me, he's only really had a 1 or 2 good seasons there. He's only been there for 3 years. Of course, they won a Super Bowl last year, but are we really crediting Burce Arians with the Super Bowl that year? I mean, his first year there, they went 8-8, and Jameis Winston had 30 touchdowns, but he also had 30 picks. Last year, there was clearly some issues. They had a lot of injuries, but his coaching wasn't overcoming these issues. This is what the coaches do now, right? You have these issues, you have this adversity. What is the coach going to do to make you take that next step? To me, he was a distraction, and the Antonio Brown thing was bad. I'm not blaming him for that. I think Antonio Brown is a different story, but look, they needed some fresh perspective, some fresh blood. They're a defensive team first. No matter how much people want to talk about Brady being the guy there and how many touchdowns he threw when he led the league in passing, they win when that defense plays well. When they get to the quarterback, when they're picking off passes, that's what they're known for. And Todd Bowles is the reason that defense has been so strong for so many years. I think it was a smart move by them. I'm curious to see what happens with their offensive coordinator, Byron Leftwich.
Well, I think for all intents and purposes, Leftwich is probably staying there for the moment because, there are no head coaching opportunities left. He probably should have gotten one, but, Trent Baalke or Byron Leftwich, a guy who's totally going to screw up free agency or a guy who could be a competent head coach. Let's go with the screw up, but it's Jacksonville. Let's be real here. Rick, I'm going to throw it over to you, but I want to throw it to you with this in mind. So Justin mentioned the defense, and I think a lot of people forget this is a theme here. A lot of people like to forget the simple things. That Tampa Bay defense had that Tampa Bay defense was able to overcome 3 interceptions by Brady in the NFC Championship game to get them to that Super Bowl. They had, I want to say it was 22 quarterback pressures on Aaron Rodgers in the championship game, and then 29 against Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Now, granted, both offensive lines were crippled. Irregardless, those were still very good defenses. Those were still very good pass rushes. The linebacking duo of Levante David and Devin White was just absolutely insane. So when you think of it, I think to Justin's point, this does work out for Todd Bowles taking over a team that I think really fits him well and with a really good quarterback. But I want to throw it to you because Todd Bowles, you could speak with your firsthand experience on this to start and then go into the idea that, and this is my theory, is that yes, Todd Bowles is the head coach, but I'm almost willing to bet that the offense is just solely going to be between Byron Leftwich and Tom Brady at this point in terms of offensive play calling. And Todd Bowles can just focus on defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So Burce Arians is a 3-time Super Bowl winning coach. You forget about the years in Pittsburgh where he was their wide receiver coach and also their offensive coordinator. So he's won Super Bowls before, even with Tampa Bay. It wasn't like he hadn't won anything. And the run of Arians, has been fascinating. Like taking over Chuck Pagano in Indy. Chuck Pagano was clearly the heart and soul of that Indy team. Burce Arians had them not miss a beat, and he went 9-3 with them. Then got to deal with the Cardinals. Did good with the Cardinals, I think. Anytime you can have a positive record for a career in Arizona, that's a positive, I think. So that's significant. And then, Tampa Bay. But I think you can't really say that it's a matter of Burce Arians not being a good coach. I think Burce Arians has just kind of fell into good situations. I mean, I think the fact of the matter is that, he was retired and then he came out for Tampa Bay in the year with Jameis Winston and then Brady came back. But I think he's even said this too. It's a matter of, he wanted to leave Tampa Bay in the best possible scenario. And with Brady gone at the time, that was not a good scenario because the quarterback room was a non-starter. But when Brady came back, then he said, okay, I want to do this. But I think the way that he went about it was actually really, really impressive because I think Burce Arians reads the room. And this is a social conversation that we can dive into later or dive into, in the probably future episodes and whatnot. But I feel like he knew that the culture of the NFL would dictate that Tampa Bay might not have hired Leftwich or Bowles to be their head coach if it was a nationwide search sort of thing. To kind of be like the hand-picked successor is very, very old school, very college, very faith-driven and very trust-driven. I think that's for a guy in Burce Arians who has been in the pocket of the Glazers and who knows that it's all the business all about, giving guys opportunities. Yeah, giving it to Todd Bowles is an excellent idea. I think it works out well because in a way they don't have to replace a D coordinator. Bowles can be both. Whereas if it was Byron Leftwich, he might have only had to do one or two because it would have been his first head coaching opportunity. It might have been too much for him to kind of handle. But with Bowles, he has that pedigree and experience from being the Jets head coach. And again, yeah, I mean, it wasn't spectacular with the Jets, but at the same time, like he was a lot better than Eric Mangini was. He was a lot better,
than Adam Gase.
Than Adam Gase, absolutely. Even Crosstown, he was a lot better than Pat Shurmur and Ben McAdoo were. So he
Joe
definitely
Judge.
was.
I think people forget Todd Bowles. I think it was Todd Bowles. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys are Jets fans here, but Todd Bowles was his first or second season was that 10-win team with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And to this day, since the Jets' back-to-back AFC Championship game appearances, they've only had one double-digit win season. And Todd Bowles was the head coach for that.
Well, that was his first year, yeah. And again, that was also on the Fitzpatrick show me deal. And that kind of, allowed them to kind of, but he was also an interim in Miami back in 2011. He was 2-1. So he's had experience. And I think it's good that he gets that opportunity to, go back into a head coaching role, because again, I feel like, and Tampa Bay has been extremely progressive when it comes to, who they've been hiring. Because, I think in the last maybe 2 decades, they've had Tony Dungy, they've had Raheem Morris of Hofstra, and they've had Lovie Smith. So Bowles is the 4th minority head coach that they've had in their time. I think it's the product of the NFL that, that Arians knows how smart Bowles is and how deserving of a second chance Bowles is. Therefore, to kind of give it to him without the falderall of the Rooney Rule and how good the Rooney Rule is or how bad the Rooney Rule is, which again, debated at another time, I think. It works. Like I said, at the time I felt bad for Byron Leftwich, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense that it went to Bowles, because Leftwich can learn a little bit more, and Leftwich is going to, like you said, it's going to be Leftwich and Brady kind of running that offense. And I think it works out in that respect, because Leftwich making the final calls probably would spin Tampa Bay into a spiral again, at least for now. Maybe in a few years, but not right now.
Yeah, I think the point, and I would have loved the chance for Byron Leftwich in Jacksonville. It would have been interesting, but I also think with the way that organization's going, I'm almost happy he decided not to at the end of the day. Well, I was very happy that he decided not to, especially with Trent Baalke still being there, because my God, why would you want to work under that guy? He's just going to throw you under the bus in a couple of years. But I think Byron Leftwich, this is also a chance for him to continue to work with Brady, and I think that'll just be good for him, and to work closely with Todd Bowles, and to get to see now from 2 different guys how it is to be a head coach. I think that's going to be extremely valuable for when it's his time. Because I think Byron Leftwich, his time is coming. And whether that be in Tampa Bay, maybe when Bowles' time is done, or if it's in next offseason or the offseason from now. Because let's be honest, boys, there's always a new head coach every single year, at least minimum 1 or 2. Who knows what jobs are going to open up in next year's coaching cycle.
Right.
But I think here is a good chance for both Bowles and Byron Leftwich. I think, like you pointed out, Rick, Arians wanted to leave it in the best possible scenario for all of them, especially those 2 guys. I think he did a really good job at that.
It's not only that. Also, just more research on this. The assistant head coach is Harold Goodwin. He's a minority head coach, The defensive coordinators that they named, Casey Rogers and Larry Foote. Larry Foote's a former linebacker for the Steelers, but again, minorities. Lori Locust is assistant D-line coach, woman. So Tampa Bay is extraordinarily progressive when it comes to this, and it gives the opportunity, and it gives kind of the idea that, like you said, in a time when the NFL is so hamstrung by how poorly it's handled social constructs and social issues, for a team to be as progressive as they are with Tampa Bay, with hiring, their right mindsets and having the best coaches who doesn't matter, blur the lines, doesn't matter. I think it's something that's refreshing. Like we talked about with the Xavien Howard deal, it's refreshing to see teams give this much play and this much cognizance to issues and to promises and to respect in that mindset, I think. Absolutely.
And I think it's always been made a big deal. I remember when it was the Tampa Bay and the 49ers Super Bowl, they made a big, the Tampa Bay Super Bowl, and even the year before with San Francisco, like in those back-to-back years, like they pointed out how there was a female coaching staff females on the coaching staff for both those teams, especially with San Fran. It was a big deal, of course, with Tampa Bay last year and their whole coaching staff being. It was a really good job by Burce Arians, especially because I think he saw what happened after he left in Arizona. Because remember, Steve Wilkes, I believe, was the immediate head coach after him, and that was, you could tell that was just a lame duck. They hired Wilkes just because I don't think they really had any long term plans with him. So I think Arians saw how that happened. It was like, no. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen around here. Justin, I'm going to throw the next subject of this to you now. Todd Bowles. Now, we mentioned it. This is his second chance to be a head coach in this league. First tenure, you guys saw it with the Jets. It started out pretty good with the 10-win season, but it just kind of went down from there. The quarterbacks he had in New York were, but not limited to, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Josh McCown, Geno Smith for like half a season, and Bryce Petty. He did have rookie Sam Darnold, though. He had Sam Darnold in his rookie season, and while technically speaking, Sam Darnold threw more touchdowns the next season under Adam Gase, I think it's safe to say Sam Darnold probably would have liked Todd Bowles a hell of a lot better than Adam Gase. So,
wouldn't we all have?
Yeah. So, Justin, from your perspective as one of our Jets fans, what do you think Todd Bowles is going to take from his time with the Jets, and how is he going to make sure that the tenure is vastly better here in Tampa Bay?
Well, look, I was always a Todd Bowles fan. You know, he got a lot of slack here in New York. You know, he wasn't an emotional coach. He wasn't flashy. But I think that his decisions were more hampered by the lack of talent. You know, looking retroactively at Mike Maccagnan, he kind of stripped that team. His signings weren't great. His draft picks were never really all that successful. They had less and less talent every year. And that's what really, you know, showed with their record. I always thought Todd Bowles deserved another chance. You know, he's a Burce Arians guy, but everywhere he goes, his defense is successful. They step up. Players want to play for him. He's a smart play caller. I was expecting him to get a job somewhere else this year. I think that, you know, maybe Arians was like, maybe hold back a little bit. I'm probably going to be out of here. And that's why he stayed with Tampa Bay. But, you know, I think it's an excellent signing for Tampa Bay. It almost changes the regime without changing anything. Arians is still around in the front office. Todd Bowles was still a major presence and force in that locker room. And, you know, a new head coach could be a tumultuous thing. And it's almost like the easiest, most streamlined way to say, hey, everything's the same. It's just going to be a new face at the top of the pyramid. And, you know, it appeases a lot of different people at a lot of different levels.
Yeah. I think that is definitely one way to look at it. And I think it's going to be interesting to see because Tampa Bay, this is still a very good team. They've lost a couple pieces, mainly along that offensive line. It's going to be interesting to see how they go there. That defense still needs a little bit of work on it. They've lost a couple pieces. They retained a couple pieces as well. Carlton Davis was the big gem on that, especially in the defensive backfield, as we mentioned earlier. It's sure to be interesting to see what happens with Tampa Bay. So, Rick, I kind of want to throw this to you as probably the last talking point here with Tampa Bay. Maybe you could split this into two parts, but with Brady, do you buy any of what the rumors are trying to start, or that Brady didn't want to come back under Burce Arians?
Initially, yes, a little bit, and it's not so much a matter of, you know, Brady didn't want to come back with Arians. I think it was more of a matter of Brady just didn't want to come back initially. But I think, you know, I think understanding the mindset, and even he said this in one of his pieces, he feels better when he's on the field than watching the game from the sidelines. So I think really Burce Arians is kind of more that wholesome, that humble guy that understands the game is bigger than he is, and the game is bigger than even Tom Brady is. So to put a franchise in a good spot, like he could have left Tampa Bay with Adam Gase, and that would have been a lot of fun for us to watch Adam Gase and Tom Brady try and work together, because they wouldn't have been able to. But I think he understood that, you know, he had a lot of good people in that room that were there. And the thing is, too, with Todd Bowles, you know, Todd Bowles kind of got hamstrung by the fact that in his tenure as Jets head coach, he had, I think, 3 offensive coordinators, because they had Chan Gailey, and then he retired. John Morton was there for a year. It didn't work out. Then Jeremy Bates was there for a year, and he was the quarterback coach and offensive coordinator, so it also didn't work out there, too. I take a look now, and I don't buy that there's a rift. I don't buy that there's like drama between Arians and Brady. And I mean, if that was the case, then why would Burce Arians stick around and be a senior consultant for the Buccaneers? Like, why would he still be a part of that franchise? If there was a problem with him and Brady, he would have gone to it. Sure. But if there was a real problem between him and Brady, he would have gone to another franchise because Burce Arians, even though he's coming up to 70, he's still got a lot of football knowledge and he's a wealth of experience that can be utilized in any organization. So I think it's more of a give the right guys the opportunities they deserve and also still be a part of a welcoming group, because for everything that has been said about the Glazer family, and this is probably more about Malcolm, the late father who owned the team back when they were awful. The sons and the children of Malcolm Glazer seem to be going on the right track when it comes to how Tampa Bay should progress. And again, it's the right mindset with the right, bringing back the creamsicle jerseys, that are always, everyone loves those kind of, having the right mindset of who to sign, taking on Antonio Brown, but also cutting him immediately once the antics started because they weren't dealing with any of that because that was a distraction. I think it kind of worked out in both ways. And I think for Arians, I think it's the best of both worlds in a way. Like, he's still a part of the football team, but not part of that head coaching strife. And he's also not going to take a lot of the lumps. He's not going to be the hero because he knows that head coaches don't often get praised. But he's also not going to be the guy who's the villain because when they lose, head coaches often take the blame. So he knows that it's going to work out better for him in that mindset too.
Sounds like a sweet gig he's signed himself up for now in Tampa Bay as he enters probably some of the last part. And hey, who knows? Maybe he actually, he's been in coaching for so long, but who knows? Maybe this gets a kickstart for him. Maybe he wants to be part of an executive branch now going forward in his career. He's like you both have articulated. He's done such an amazing job where he's been in terms of hiring minorities, to be part of his coaching staff. I think he should be like the guy that, forget just Tampa Bay, the NFL needs to have him like in an important role in the organization just as a whole for the league, because like everywhere else there's a lot going wrong with that. I think it's only a select few places where they're getting it right, and certainly wherever Burce Arians goes, it happens to be one of the places that gets it right in regards to being diverse with who you have in your organization. And I think that's something that the NFL needs to continue to strive for, and they need to be better with, because they need as much good PR as they can, because not a lot of good coming from them in recent times. This will be the last rapid fire question for you both. Doing this super early, of course, because, well, why not? We're going to end this with a little bit of a cliche. Early win record for Tampa Bay next season with good old Todd Bowles as head coach. Rick, I'll throw it to you first.
That's a really good question, because I think they still have more moves to make in the offseason that can, and then always, of course, the draft too is going to be a big significant help. So
agreed.
I'm just trying to see. Let me see who their opponents are going to be this year coming up. So obviously, I think we can say they're going to go 6-0 in their division. I think we can note that pretty easily. I mean, 5-1. I'll go 5-1 in the division to kind of be on the safer side. They get the NFC
that is
West
what we said last year, though.
Yeah, they get the NFC West, which is going to be a nightmare. They get the AFC North, which is going to be really interesting, and then they have Green Bay, Dallas, and Kansas City. It's tricky. It's a really that might be one of the toughest schedules that I've seen for an NFL team that's not the Jets. Jets always every year get the worst schedule. I think it's a joke at this point. It really is.
Iron sharpens iron.
I'm gonna go 11-6. I'm gonna go 11-6 for Tampa Bay. They're gonna win their division. They're gonna host a playoff game, but I can see a few stumbling blocks along the way just because of how strong the other teams have gotten. I think the way the Rams are, I think that could be a stumbling block. I think the Bengals matchup's interesting, the Browns matchup's interesting, the Packers. The fact that they're playing Dallas in Dallas is interesting as well. I mean, if that's a Thanksgiving game, oh doctor, that would be amazing.
I hope it is. We need a good Thanksgiving game.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I'm gonna stick to 11-6. I think that's a good bar for them to be. I'm sure it could go higher, but 11-6 is a good bar, I think, for them.
That's not bad, especially because, like you said, it is super early. I just feel it's interesting because now you have a change in the coaching structure, and it could end up being a change in the offense as well. Maybe this works out even better for them. Justin, you kind of on that same. I think three of us agree double-digit win team for sure next season.
I'm kind of leaning towards maybe 10-7 or even 9-8. I don't really love what they've done addressing the secondary. They're missing some holes in the offensive line. They lost. Did Leonard Fournette resign? I believe he
Yeah,
did.
he's
Correct.
staying.
He did,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, they lost Ronald Jones, I believe. They're missing some pieces. They didn't replace that production that Antonio Brown had. Chris Godwin hasn't been fully healthy in 2 years. They have a really tough schedule. I think they'll win some surprising games, but I could see them dropping some surprising games too.
Well,
I would say maybe 9-8.
Yeah,
probably leaning more towards 10-7 though.
So the way I see it, home against Seattle, that's a win because Seattle's a shell of their former selves. Even though it's away in Pittsburgh, it's probably a win too because I don't buy that Mitchell Trubisky's going to lead the Steelers over the Bucs. I don't buy that for a second. Then it becomes a question of where do your other wins come from? Away at San Francisco, probably. I would say.
I don't necessarily agree with that. San Francisco has a tough defense. They could get after Tom Brady. The one way that everyone has always beaten Tom Brady is putting him on his back. He doesn't mess around with pass coverage. He's on his back. He's not. That's why he's been in the league for so long. He doesn't take hits.
Yeah.
If you can get to him, he's not going to be able to throw the ball. Then you're going to have to run it against that defensive line. I don't necessarily see them winning in San Francisco.
Yeah. So it's
if they win all their division games this year and they win a couple games against good teams, like maybe the Packers or another 500, after all of that, I still had them going about 9-8.
Right. So it's home against the Rams, the Seahawks, the Packers, the Ravens, the Bengals, and the Chiefs. And it's away against Arizona, San Francisco, Dallas, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh.
Against such high-powered passing games, you see them winning. They lost some secondary pieces. They didn't even retain the guys they had, and they were bad secondary last year. They were.
But
I don't. Well, we'll see what they do in the draft, and then maybe they make some signings. But
I think
them stopping anyone in the air, and in today's NFL, that is a must.
I think they of the top four teams that are outside of their division that I see them playing at home: the Rams, the Packers. I'm going to say the Bengals, even though the defending champions, but and then the Chiefs. I see them going 3-1 against those teams. I do. I don't know if they're going to beat the Rams, but I see them beating the Packers at home. I see them beating the Chiefs at home. I see them beating the Chiefs at home because no Hill. That's your defense is different. I see them beating the Bengals because will Joe Burrow take a step up? I don't know. It's
they still got to beat teams like the Ravens at home.
Yeah.
Even teams like there's going to be dark horse teams in that division like the Panthers who still have a really tough defense. They can't really pass the ball, but McCaffrey should be healthy.
The Saints have had their number the last couple of years too. They haven't lost to Brady in the regular season.
Although I think the Saints will take a major step back this year. Also,
I think so too. Yeah.
The
Falcons with Mariota, I don't see
it. I don't see them beating teams that are just going to throw all day against them, like the Bengals, like the Chiefs, like the Rams. They play the Browns. It'll be interesting when in the schedule they'll play the Browns. They play the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona. Even Dallas will probably throw the ball all over them. I don't necessarily see them winning a lot of these tougher games.
This might change things around. I don't think we know what game it is, but we know that one of Tampa Bay's home games is not going to be a home game. They're going to be playing in Munich. So that if I'm the NFL, I want to put Tampa Bay and Tom Brady against Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay in Munich, or against Patrick Mahomes in Munich. It's probably going to be Seattle. Let's be honest, because why not? But and the NFL's got a pretty good solid footing in Germany. The German football league is pretty stacked with a lot of good teams that are there and a lot of good pride. So it could be interesting, but that throws another wrench into everything too. This damn international series throws a wrench into everything. Honestly.
You want to talk about W's, boys? You want to talk about interesting? That's what this episode was. I can't wait to clip off Justin calling Tampa Bay a 9-win team with absolutely zero context of when he said it, and we're going to play it in the future if they make it to the Super Bowl. We're totally going to end up doing that.
Hey, they could still be a 9-win team and make the Super Bowl though. So
very accurate. Very accurate.
I still have them very much winning the division. It's not going to be close. And I when we spoke about it last time in a previous episode. Rick said he doesn't really know if they're going to win the Super Bowl. I will refuse to eliminate them from contention of being a Super Bowl. You still have Tom Brady. You still have some major weapons. I still have PTSD, and they still have a top defensive line. They have what it takes. Can they put it together? New head coach, They're gonna have to make some new additions to the starting lineup on both sides of the ball. We'll see if they could do it. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in the draft and with the rest of free agency.
And speaking of draft and free agency, we will continue to talk about all that stuff here in the coming weeks, including, we might be agents of chaos, but we can have a little bit of order here and decorum every once in a while. And very soon, we ourselves are going to decide what kind of draft order we may want to do for a little bit of a fun mock ourselves. But those are plans of the future. This is the present. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us three, the sports agents of chaos, on yet another episode. Gentlemen, once again, thank you on this fine evening. As this episode just gets better. The stage gets bigger. We shine brighter. The sun is shining on us in ways that it did not for Loki and Thor in the MCU. Boom, boom. Yet another movie in Hollywood reference there. That's another one on this episode. I think we're going to call it a good call it quits here today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining three of us. As always, we will be back next time.